The pain of losing a good employee in a small business is hard to put into words because the loss is everywhere all at once. A role that was supposed to be running quietly suddenly takes up the owner's calendar again. The remaining team picks up the work and feels it. The position has to be reopened. The hiring process restarted. Weeks of training repeated. Somewhere in the middle of all of that, a customer notices that the people they trusted are no longer the ones they are talking to. The Society for Human Resource Management has been studying turnover costs across small and mid-sized businesses for over a decade, and their consolidated 2026 data, along with research from WellHub, the workplace well-being platform that publishes the annual U.S. turnover report, puts the average all-in cost of replacing a single small business employee at around $3,000 for a junior role and considerably more for anyone with experience. World Metrics, which aggregates labor market data for businesses under 100 employees, finds that small businesses across the country lose roughly 12.5% of their annual payroll to turnover. That is, budget already being spent, just in a form that never has to be authorized line by line. So the investment in retention is happening either way. The decision in front of the owner is only about where the money flows. Today, it flows into interview rounds and onboarding cycles that restart every year. A few $100s a year of it could flow into software that helps the owner notice when someone is starting to think about leaving before the resignation conversation lands on the calendar. Underneath that decision is a framework with 4 tool tiers and 6 platforms. Side-by-side annual cost math for a 10-person team and a 30-person team. The lived version of 12.5% of payroll lost to turnover takes the form of the 3rd Tuesday in a row of bad sleep, the meeting that gets rescheduled because there is nobody left to take it, the customer call that does not go well because the person who knew that account has moved on. The framework that follows aims at getting that experience under control before the next exit lands on the calendar. The advice that an owner gets when they start asking this question tends to come from 2 camps that talk past each other. One camp is the buyer guide sites and review channels that publish a ranked list of 10 retention platforms every quarter. Their answer is to pick the one with the highest score for the relevant company size and start a free trial by Friday. The other camp is the retention-focused content that talks about culture, conversations, and weekly check-ins. Their answer is that software is a distraction from the actual practice, and most small businesses do not need any of it. Both camps are right inside their own assumption, and both miss the actual question, which is at what point the practice stops being enough on its own. There is a real moment in the life of a growing business when a 30-minute Monday one-on-one is no longer being remembered the same way 2 months later, when the recognition that mattered last quarter is now buried under 3 new hires worth of onboarding notes. When the manager, who used to know everyone, is now leading a team they only see in batches, that moment is real. It shows up at a specific team size, and it is the moment software starts to earn its place. A common phrase among small business operators describing this transition is some version of year-end on spreadsheets is brutal. The phrase is shorthand for the experience of trying to reconcile 12 months of time-off requests, performance notes, recognition moments, and pulse survey-style observations from a system that was never designed to hold any of it. The operators who reach that moment a year too late say so in those same conversations. The operators who bought software a year too early mention how the surveys kept showing the same 5 problems that the team could have told them about for free. The question worth asking is how to know which side of that line a business is on right now and which tier of tool fits the team on each side of it. The framework has 4 tiers, and the tier that fits is decided mostly by team size, manager layer maturity, and what the business already pays for in payroll or HR software. The first tier is the manual tier, and it is the right answer for a small business with fewer than 10 employees and stable retention. At this size, the owner still has a direct line to every person on the team. The one-on-ones still fit on a single calendar, and a Google form sent quarterly with 3 open-ended questions is closer to a real engagement instrument than most software dashboards. Buying retention software at this stage is not a small mistake. It can actively hurt the practice by replacing the conversation that retains people with a workflow that produces a report nobody reads. The dollar cost of staying manual at this tier is 0. The opportunity cost is also close to 0 because the data a retention tool would generate is already in the owner's head. The second tier is like Pulse software, and it is the right answer for a team of roughly 10 to 25 employees where retention is currently stable, but the manager layer is starting to form. At this size, the owner is no longer the only person doing one-on-ones. The consistency of those conversations across managers is starting to drift. The cost of one preventable exit between hiring, onboarding, and lost productivity easily clears $5,000 for anything above a junior role. A tool at this tier costs roughly $400 to $600 a year for a 10-person team, asks the team about 3 to 5 questions a week or every other week, and produces a heat map that surfaces the things nobody quite said out loud yet. The cheapest meaningful entry point for a small business sits here. The third tier is engagement specialist software, and it is the right answer when retention is no longer stable, the manager layer is fully formed, and the business is large enough to absorb a serious tool, but not yet large enough to need a full HR system as the spine. A tool at this tier costs between $1,500 and $4,000 a year for a 10 to 30 person team, depending on whether the picks are recognition-led, performance-led, or both. And the floor on some of the bigger tools means a business below 25 employees often cannot reach the entry minimum. This is the tier where the most expensive mistakes happen, because the gap between we need help here and we picked the wrong help is widest at this size. The fourth tier is a full HR system with retention features built in, and it is the right answer for any small business that has crossed roughly 25 employees, has somebody in the business who handles HR even part-time, and is starting to bump into compliance milestones like the Affordable Care Act threshold at 50 employees. At this tier, the retention layer almost comes free with the platform because the business is already paying for the HR system or the payroll system underneath it. The annual cost runs from about $3,000 to over $6,000 depending on which platform and which plan. And the cheapest path is usually the one where the retention layer activates as an upgrade to a system the business was buying anyway. The framework holds because the tiers do not overlap in who they fit. A retention specialist trying to serve a 6-person team is overbuilt, and a Pulse tool trying to serve a 50-person team is underbuilt. The tools that survive in each tier do so because they fit a specific shape of business at a specific stage. The rest of the video walks through the 6 platforms that fit those tiers for small business specifically. The tool most often mentioned by name when small business operators describe their first move out of spreadsheets is 155. Its entry plan, called Engage, lands at $4 per user per month when billed annually, which works out to $480 a year for a 10-person team. That price gets pulse surveys, action planning workflows, heat maps that visualize disengagement signals across the team, lifecycle surveys for onboarding and exit, and an NNPS framework, which produces a single trackable number for the team's overall sentiment. The 155 lineup also has a perform tier at $11 per user per month and a total platform tier at $16 per user per month. But for a small business that has not yet built out a full performance management practice, the $4 Engage tier is the right entry. Moving up the 155 tiers makes sense only once the business has decided to systematize performance reviews as a formal cycle. Most 10 to 20 employee teams are not at that stage yet, and adding performance management software before the practice itself exists tends to produce reviews that nobody trusts and managers do not run on time. The lower cost alternative at this tier is Officevibe, which is now part of Workleap after a 2025 brand consolidation. Workleap's published pricing for Officevibe lands at approximately $5 per user per month when billed annually, with a 10-user minimum that puts the annual floor at around $600. The product is built around weekly pulse surveys, peer feedback workflows, and a guided one-on-one structure that managers can use without HR training. Officevibe is the more Spartan of the two options, with fewer advanced analytics than 155 and a lighter set of action planning workflows. But for a sub 20-person team that wants the simplest possible pulse instrument running by next week, it is a reasonable second pick to evaluate. The decision rule for Tier 1 is straightforward. If pulse data is the specific gap and the team is between roughly 10 and 25 employees, 155 Engage at $480 a year is the dominant pick for most businesses, with Officevibe as a slightly cheaper, slightly simpler alternative for teams that want minimum features at the lowest possible total cost. Either tool pays for itself if it prevents a single exit every 2 to 3 years, and the math on that is generous compared to what these tools actually deliver when they are used properly. The two specialists at this tier serve different gaps. One is performance-led and analytics-heavy. The other is recognition-led and rewards-anchored. Lattice is the performance-led pick, and it is the tool that comes up most often when small business operators describe the move from a pulse tool to something more serious. A common operator description of Lattice is some version of the Rolls-Royce of performance management systems, which captures both the depth of the product and the price reality that goes with it. Lattice uses a modular pricing structure that starts with a foundations tier at $11 per seat per month billed annually and stacks add-on modules on top. The performance module, which covers reviews, talent calibration, and promotions, adds $8 per seat per month. The engagement module, which covers pulse surveys, onboarding and exit surveys, and NPS, adds $4. The goals module is another 8, and the grow module for career development is another 4. The headline number that shapes the small business decision, though, is the $4,000 annual minimum that applies to any Lattice contract. That floor means a business below roughly 25 seats often cannot reach the entry minimum without paying for capacity it does not use, which is why Lattice is rarely the right pick for a 15-person company, even when the features look attractive on the website. This is the place where small business owners most often spend money they do not get back. The Lattice demo is excellent, the website is beautifully designed, and the sales conversation is reassuring. The $4,000 minimum does not feel real until the credit card has been charged, and the team that was supposed to use the platform has not logged in for 3 weeks. Bonusly is the recognition-led pick, and its pricing model is unusual enough that the all-in cost matters more than the headline number. The team plan, which covers most small businesses, lands at $3 per seat per month when billed monthly, or $30 per seat per year when billed annually. For a 10-person team, the annual subscription is about $300. The subscription, though, is only half of the cost. Bonusly's model is that the team awards each other small recognition points, and those points cash out into rewards from a catalog at face value. A team that gives out $10 of recognition rewards per employee per month spends another $1,200 a year on top of the subscription. The all-in cost for a 10-person team on Bonusly with a $10 per employee monthly reward budget is around $1,500 a year, which is the number to keep in mind when comparing against tools that price entirely in subscription. A common combination that operators describe is running 155 for pulse data and Bonusly for peer recognition together. As a stack, the combined subscription cost for a 10-person team is about $780 a year, and adding the typical reward budget brings the total to around $2,000. This stack covers most of what a tool like Lattice covers at half the cost, with the caveat that the workflows live in 2 different products rather than one. The decision rule for Tier 2 is built around the named gap. If performance management is the specific need and the team has crossed 25 seats, So the Lattice minimum is not a problem. Lattice is the dominant pick at this tier. If recognition is the named gap and pulse data is already coming from somewhere else, Bonusly is the right pick. If both are gaps and the team has not yet crossed the Lattice minimum, the 155 plus Bonusly stack covers most of what is needed. The two platforms at this tier are the same two that come up at the top of every small business HR roundup, because they are the two systems most small businesses end up running once they cross 25 employees. The framing that holds up well across the small business market is that Gusto is the payroll-led all-in-one with the smoothest onboarding for new businesses. And BambooHR is the HR-first system of record for teams who care about culture and people management before payroll. BambooHR runs on a per employee, per month price for businesses with 26 employees or more, and on a flat monthly minimum for businesses with 25 or fewer. The core plan is $10 per employee per month, with a flat floor of $250 a month for teams under 26, which works out to about $3,000 a year for a 10-person team and $6,000 a year for a 50-person team on core. The retention layer on Bamboo HR is not a separate add-on. The core plan includes employee satisfaction surveys, an EMPS framework, time off and benefits tracking that surface burnout patterns, and an AI-driven workflow called Ask Bamboo HR that handles routine employee policy questions. The Pro plan, at $17 per employee per month, adds deeper performance management, expanded automation, and policy handbook intelligence. For most small businesses, Core is the right entry, and the retention features inside it are enough to replace what a Tier 1 Pulse tool would have done separately. Gusto runs on a base fee plus per employee model. The simple plan at $49 per month base plus $6 per employee per month is the payroll-only entry point and does not include the retention layer. For a 10-person team, Simple lands at about $1,300 a year. The Plus plan is where retention features activate. Plus costs $80 per month base, plus $12 per employee per month, which is roughly $2,400 a year for a 10-person team, and it adds performance reviews, employee engagement surveys, time tracking sync, project tracking, and workforce cost reports. The premium plan at $180 per month base plus $22 per employee per month adds a dedicated customer success manager and the full performance management suite. For a business already paying for payroll, the move from Gusto Simple to Gusto Plus costs about $1,000 a year extra and adds the retention layer. A separate Tier 1 Pulse tool would have cost $500 a year on top of payroll, and a separate Tier 2 specialist would have cost $2,000 to $4,000. Plus is the cheapest path because the business was paying for the payroll spine anyway. The retention tooling on Plus is not as deep as a dedicated engagement platform, but for a business under 50 employees that primarily needs the basics, it does the job. The decision rule for Tier 3 is whether the business is HR first or payroll first in how it grew. A team where culture, performance, and people management have always been a priority tends to land on Bamboo HR Core and add a separate payroll tool when needed. A team that started with payroll as the main operational pain and grew people management on top tends to land on Gusto Plus and gets the retention layer as part of the payroll upgrade. Both paths arrive at roughly the same destination at 25 to 50 employees. The framework collapses into a few concrete decisions if it is read by current team size. A business with fewer than 10 employees and stable retention should not buy any of this software yet. The practice still fits on the owner's calendar, the data lives in the owner's head, and the cost of any tool would exceed what it could realistically save in turnover for a team this size. The right move is to spend 30 minutes a week on retention practice and revisit the question once the team crosses 10 employees or once the first preventable exit happens. A business between 10 and 25 employees with stable retention should consider Tier 1 Light Pulse software, which means 155 engage at $4 per user per month as the dominant pick, or Officevibe as a slightly cheaper alternative. The total annual cost runs between $400 and $600 for most teams in this range. Skipping Tier 1 at this size is fine if retention is genuinely stable and the manager layer is still small. Jumping past Tier 1 to Tier 2 or Tier 3 is usually overbuilding. A business between 10 and 25 employees that has lost 2 or more people in a year should evaluate either a Tier 2 specialist or a Tier 3 HRIS, depending on whether retention is the only gap or whether HR, payroll, and compliance are also gaps. If retention is the only named gap, the 155 plus bonusly stack at around $2,000 a year, all in is the strongest answer. If HR or payroll consolidation is also a gap, Gusto Plus or BambooHR becomes the better pick because the retention layer comes with the platform. A business between 25 and 50 employees should treat Tier 3 as the default. BambooHR Core at $3,000 to $6,000 a year, depending on team size, or Gusto Plus at $3,000 to $10,000 a year are the two paths. The decision between them is whether the business is HR first or payroll first in its operating identity. Adding a Tier 2 specialist on top of Tier 3 makes sense only if a specific gap remains after the HRIS is in place, which is usually peer recognition or deep performance management. A business above 50 employees has crossed the Affordable Care Act compliance threshold and almost certainly needs a full HR system regardless of retention concerns. At this size, a Tier 3 platform is the spine. And the question of whether to add a Tier 2 engagement specialist on top depends on whether the retention layer inside the HRIS is good enough for the team's named gaps or whether a more sophisticated engagement instrument is justified. The thing that holds across every tier is that software amplifies the retention practice the business is already running. Software does not replace the practice, and software does not generate a practice where none exists. A business buying its first retention tool while the manager layer one-on-one cadence is still ad hoc is buying noise. The same tool, bought after the practice is in place, becomes the difference between losing 2 people a year and losing 1. The decision sitting in front of any small business owner about whether to buy retention software does not cost much in absolute terms. The math runs to a few thousand a year, plus or minus, depending on the tier. What the choice represents, though, is which stage of running this business the owner believes the team is at, and that judgment shapes the next 2 years of how the team experiences working there. The annual cost math for every tool walked through above, along with the official pricing pages for each platform and the affiliate links for the 3 programs that offer one, are all in the description below this video. The 3 tools with affiliate links are 155, BambooHR, and Gusto, and picking one of those through the partner link helps fund the next video at no extra cost. The 2 tools that appear in the framework without partner links are Lattice and Officevibe, because their programs do not fit the channel structure. That has no effect on the recommendation logic. Lattice is still the right pick for a 25-plus employee business where performance management is the named gap. And Officevibe is still the cheapest practical Tier 1 option for a team that wants the simplest pulse instrument running by next week. Honest framing matters more than commission, and naming the no affiliate tools out loud is part of how that honesty stays intact across videos. The most useful question to bring into the comments section under this video is which tier the business sits in right now and what the specific gap is that would push it to the next tier. The team size band, the named gap, and whichever tool is currently being considered are the 3 pieces of information that turn a general framework question into a specific decision. The answers across the comments turn into the data that shapes the next video on this channel. And the threads where multiple owners are wrestling with the same tier boundary tend to become the seed for the most useful follow-up content.